right, well, I see that it is 10 o'clock straight up, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everybody being with us this morning. If you are joining us for the first time, just a reminder, we're going over Ninja Selling by Larry Kendall, and today we're going to cover the buyer process. But before we do that, we're going to roll through some gratitudes. Who wants to start it off with some gratitudes this morning? Could be real estate related or absolutely nothing to do with real estate. Don't make me start calling on people.
My mom was in the hospital last week. She had a mild heart attack and a few other little issues, and she went home yesterday. So I'm grateful that she went home.
All right. I read some encouraging news on one of the vaccines this morning, and I noticed on my way in that it had shot the Dow up about 1,500 points. I don't know what it's doing at this second, but that was encouraging. It was one that's they think it's going to be like 90% effective, which is about 40% more than they were hoping for. So that sounds very encouraging. Who else has got some gratitudes for us?
We've got beautiful fall weather in Chattanooga.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty nice across most of our footprint this morning. I don't know. I was noticing yesterday that the leaves were particularly colorful this weekend. So lots of things out there to be grateful for. All right, let's go into a review from last week. Who wants to tell us about the power need dynamic real quick? Come on, who was with us last week? Somebody jump up there. Power need dynamic. So when your power is high, what does that make your need? High or low?
Low.
Yeah, there you go. So keep this in mind. If you have low need, it gives you high power. And as this relates to us and how we interact with our clients, we do not necessarily want to show high need. Okay. You want to keep your kind of composure relatively stable and calm when you're dealing with people. Okay, there was 3 bullet points that I made on this slide last week about words have power. I'm going to share the first one with you. Do any of you remember what the other 2 were? Let's kind of go in order. Words matter, and then John Patterson, were you with us last week? Any clues on this one? Yeah, you still have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was here, but I'm drawing a blank.
All right. Anybody can help them out?
Choice.
Thank you, Judy. Choice of words matters more. And what about the last one? Anybody?
It matters who says it.
That is important. That absolutely is important. And I think that's going to be on maybe the next slide. But the passion. So words matter. Choice of words matters more. And the passion that you use with those words matters the most. 3 rules of communication. Somebody was ahead of the game here on this one. What's the next one? Showing is better than telling. Remember we talked about the fires in California, probably more powerful to show them versus just tell them about it. What are the other 2?
Asking is better than telling.
Awesome. Going today. All right. So today we're going to go ahead and get started into the buyer process. And I emailed you a couple of different things, and I would just ask you to keep this in mind when you're thinking about the buyer process. And that is, I don't really care what 10 steps you use, or if you combine the first few, like I've combined the first few into one step. I don't really care which 10 that you use. I just want you to use a process as you're working through this, okay? But we're going to go ahead and step through these one at a time. So the greeting, this is not exactly the picture of what I want you to be, right? That heavy-handed salesman type. But anybody remember the greeting process that we covered a few weeks ago? How you want to do it? There's just 3 simple steps, and it's not leading with your name.
Welcoming.
Yep, yep. So you're going to welcome or enroll, as Larry calls it in the book. What's next?
Acknowledge.
Somebody is either paying close attention or looking at their notes from a few weeks ago. So thank you. So you're gonna enroll somebody, then you're going to acknowledge them. You could also throw in a compliment there, that never hurts, and then go for the introduction. So that's what you're going to try to work on with the greeting step. Meeting, now this gets into back when we first started talking about ninja selling. I told you there were a few things that I thought were a little on the woo-woo for me. Larry talks in the book about that sometimes when you greet people, there's a kind of an awkward energy. And so he suggests that when you move to this meeting phase, that you kind of get away from wherever you greeted them. I don't know if this works or not, but I'm just trying to follow the process. So I'm trying it, okay? So if this is at your office, maybe you're going to meet somebody in the lobby, and then you're going to go to a conference room. That's pretty easy to do. Or in a house, if it's if it's at a house, you're going to maybe meet them at the door, and then you're going to go hopefully to the kitchen table. You're going to go somewhere different than where you greet them. And next, you're going to start into this buyer interview. And the 2 things that I think are important here: show them that you're following a process. Don't just try to do this off of the top of your head. And 2, take notes. I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I get mildly irritated when I go to a restaurant, and let's say you're with 3 or 4 people, and the waiter or waitress decides to take your orders but doesn't write anything down. I always like to say, I don't say this to the waiters, by the way, but the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind. So take notes when you're meeting with that client. And guess what? They like it when you take notes, because they get that you are taking in what they say. You're listening and you're writing it down, so they know it's hopefully important to you.
Most of the time they're not, though.
Most of the time they're
when they're writing it down, their mind is somewhere else. You probably be better off letting them just memorize it.
It depends,
Just from experience.
Sometimes it's a little crazy when you tell them your order, and then like 30 seconds later they come back and say,
What'd you have?
What'd you have? Did you get the iced tea or the whatever? And hopefully, we don't want to do this, because we're hopefully going to demonstrate with our customers that we're paying attention and we're taking notes. Again, this is an example of that buyer process worksheet that I sent you on the email. And I sent you these in a Word document format, so you can take them and edit them to your heart's content. But I would just encourage you, just take them and use them. You don't have to use every single little question on there, but hopefully it'll be helpful for you. By the way, has anybody had a chance to look through some of those, either the process sheet that I sent or this worksheet, and have any input on it? Thoughts, critiques, criticisms? You're not going to hurt my feelings, because guess what? I didn't come up with it.
You come up with it.
Any other thoughts there?
I have a question.
Sure.
In the part where it talks about, are you familiar with how real estate works here in the Mid-South? And then the next one, are you familiar with the current market conditions? Those
Right.
are basically the same, right? I mean,
Well, I think it could be 2 different things. So let's take the first one. There may be certain other parts of the country that people may be coming from where they the terms are slightly different. So in California, they put things in escrow and it's just handled a little bit differently. So that's kind of what I interpret how things are done with real estate in your area, whether, and I would just use, your town or your area that you're in there.
I think another thing they do in California is once they come to the closing table and escrow is transferred, usually the buyer doesn't get to move in until 30 days after closing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be different from all, it's different in all parts of the country. And Mark, you bring up a good point, because there's some people that'll come from some parts of the country that they absolutely expect to get their keys at closing. And you may be in an area, our area, it's pretty typical that people might get a couple of days after closing to get out. Now, sometimes, obviously, if the house is vacant or people have another house that they're going to, they may be willing to give possession at closing, but there's a lot of people that don't want to do that. So it's things like that on, how real estate is done in your area. The market conditions is a whole nother issue right now. And I say issue, I mean, it's an education process, because if somebody hasn't bought a house in a while, they may not fully understand how competitive the market is in a given area. And sometimes people are not going to figure that out until they lose a couple of houses. I'm sure that many of you on this call have people that are like that right now, that maybe they didn't quite get it until they lost a house or two or three. But one of the things that we need to start doing is talking about those market conditions early and often, because that will hopefully get people ahead of the game. And then you won't feel like you're applying pressure to somebody when you get down to writing an offer, and then you're telling them basically, we're going to need to offer above full price. We're going to maybe need to not ask for any concessions, not ask for any closing costs, not ask for a home warranty, whatever those things might be. The earlier in the process that you can have those discussions, the better off I believe it will be. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that market discussion a little bit later. Any other questions on the buyer process worksheet that you might have come across that anybody wanted to discuss?
I think another important question to ask is, what is their preferred form of communication? Some people are, sticking to text, which I don't really care for that much. But I just think it's important. And then trying to find out like who's going to be the more predominant decision maker, so that you're communicating appropriately to the right person.
Those are great points. And I would suggest, even with the people who may tell you that their preferred communication is text, or maybe they have a job that during the day they can answer a text and they may not be able to take a phone call or an email. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, does anybody remember that when the game is on the line, what do you want to do? If at all possible.
Get on the phone.
Yeah, get on the phone, or face-to-face, even better. Phone would be next. But, and you can do things like this. You can Zoom with people if you can't get together face-to-face, but you can pick up so much more and work things out a little bit better. And that's even important with agents. These days, at least get on the phone with them. Don't just communicate over text all the time.
Neil, I found that sometimes if somebody cannot take a call during the day or during whatever meeting time they have, I'll send them a text and say, hey, I need to talk with you ASAP regarding whatever. Please call me at your first available moment. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but at least I get that opportunity, and
Right.
I don't irritate them by calling and interrupting a meeting.
Good point. So it's a good thing, or maybe you can schedule a time figure out when they have 15, 30 minutes during the day that they might be able to break away for a quick call. All right, next, you're going to have some type of a buyer packet, and this would be a good point. I'm just kind of curious. I'm sure many of you on here have and use a buyer packet. I'm just curious, what are you putting in those buyer packets? Anyone? If you're using a buyer packet, what are you putting in there?
One of the more recent changes we've made is we'll put an multiple offer menu in there where we can take the opportunity to kind of explain to them some of the techniques that we're seeing in our current market that will, potentially win somebody a multiple offer, like some of the things that you mentioned. But again, that way, when we go to write an offer, it's not coming out of left field. They're prepared. They've had time to review it.
I like that one. I would like to see that, Karen. So
Sure, I'm happy to send that over. Sure.
If you have that, if you can throw it in the chat, if you happen to be at your computer or have it where you have it as a PDF or Word doc or something, you can just attach it in the chat so that we could see it. That would be awesome. That's a great one. I haven't heard of that specific one yet. Who else has got something?
I put the home buying process from start to finish, and I include everything, the seller side process as well as the buyer side. And that way they realize it's not just we sit down, we write an offer, and then we move into the house. There's so many things and so many places where something could fall through the cracks if it's not done in a timely manner, or things they're going to need to give to their lender. And they look at it and it gives them a better idea that doing it by themselves with all of the steps might be a disaster.
Yeah, one of the things that a little sentence I picked up out of Ninja was especially where, Pat, you were talking about people doing it by themselves. I've tried to use this language and incorporate it in, especially so if somebody's thinking about possibly selling their house by themselves, it would be so you're thinking about doing it by yourself and on your own. I like to try to combine those two. So by yourself and on your own, but you're not saying it in a way that is, it could come across as, Pat, you're not going to try this by yourself and on your own. I'm just trying to kind of say it more naturally, but other things that people put in buyer packets, it could be a map of the area. Maybe it's especially important if it's somebody that's moving into your area from out of the state or out of the county. Other things that you might consider would be a draft purchase and sale agreement or a draft buyer agency agreement. So things like that. Anybody else got anything on their buyer packet that they're using?
I wanted to ask, can Pat share that start to finish document she was talking about?
Yeah, I think they have it at marketing. But I know I've got it in my
I've grabbed one. I've got an image off of the Crye-Leike website that's got a kind of a simplified version of a buyer process, and it's actually in the slideshow a little bit later, but you can see it.
Mine is right like a flow chart. Is that what you're using, Neil?
It's it's interesting. I Googled some buyer process flow charts, and some are uber complicated. The one I've got in the slideshow a little bit later is not that complicated. So, you can, again, you don't want to put something up that's so confusing that you're going to paralyze people into keeping them from making a decision. You're trying to get them, clear on the process and not have many questions. So don't come up with things that are too complex. One of the things that Pat brought up, I heard last week in a sales meeting that I thought was really good. And it has related to if people are getting a loan. And this was Pat Sandlin with Community Mortgage shared this, that in the first 5 days or so, that is a very critical time that they try to respond to any lender request as quickly as possible. So especially important if you're doing a loan and they've got something pretty short, like a 30-40 day close, you need to make sure that you kind of reiterate that they're probably going to be asking for some things, and especially important during that first week that they try to respond to those as quick as possible.
Okay, Neil?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
Hi, I include timing is everything in my packet. And I
Okay.
explain to my buyers the importance of having things accomplished and done within that time frame, and the repercussions from not adhering to that policy. I also do a checklist document. So I make sure that everything is checked off and we're on point.
Nice. For those of you in Tennessee, I'm sure the other states may have something like this as well. There's actually a document on the forms that is a timeline kind of compliance checklist. You might think about that one as another option.
How about the property condition disclosure? Even though the seller fills it out, the buyer's going to have to read it and sign it.
Yeah, you could have a sample property condition
Right.
disclosure. Yeah.
Blank.
All right, let's move into this step number 5, the funnel process. So I actually want you to, this is one of the things we're going to work on during our breakout groups this morning, but you don't have to draw a perfect funnel, but you should practice just getting a scratch pad and drawing a rudimentary funnel so that you can do this, especially for those visual learners out there, that they can actually see you drawing a funnel and talking about things like you're going to put everything in there so you don't miss anything, because this is one of the buyer's greatest fears, is that they're going to miss something. And anybody know what one of the other ones is? He said it in these pages.
They're going to pay too much.
Yep, pay too much. Absolutely. So we're going to try to address those things when we talk about this funnel process. So you're going to pay too much. You're going to not pay too much. And then this next one's kind of interesting, having a rolling top 3. Now, I understand in today's market that some areas, some price points, you may not have even 3 choices. It may be 1 choice. But these are key things that you just want to practice this as you talk to people about the funnel process. So practice drawing a funnel on a piece of paper, and then, tell them all the things that you're going to put in there. So whether it's a new construction home, and you might circle it and draw a little arrow, you're going to put it in the funnel. You're going to look at for sale by owners, and you might say something like, Heather, most for sale by owners in our area are generally willing to work with an agent. And so that's something that if you come across one of those, send it to me. I'll reach out to the person, see if they're willing to work with us. Most likely they will be. So you can circle that, draw a little arrow, and throw it in the funnel. And then your multiple listing system, and try not to use acronyms where possible here, especially if you're dealing with a first-time buyer. You're going to show them that multiple listing service and drop that in the funnel. But at some point, you're going to say, our goal is to include everything so we don't miss anything. And then once we get it narrowed down, we can do a comprehensive CMA, and you can see the sales activity for that specific area to make sure that you don't pay too much. And then lastly, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, our goal is to try to have what I call a rolling top 3. And that's 3 choices that will hopefully work for you and that are in your price range. So as we come up with these houses, I may ask you from time to time, is that in your top 3? And I don't know if any of you else do this, but if I'm in a buyer and or with them, I know people aren't in our cars nearly as much as they used to be, but I would actually, if they looked at a house and it was a no, I would actually wad up the paper and chuck it in the back seat as one that wasn't going to work for them. I'm just trying to get it out of their mind. Because of any of you that know, if you've looked at more than 5 or 6 houses in a day or in a single whack, people can get those houses all confused together. Yes.
Also, I read that you should put in the houses in the neighborhood that have already probably been sold, contingent, or pending already, so that when you pass by them and the buyer's like, what about that house? What about that house? you already say, hey, you already know what's going on with it. So buyer doesn't have to go back and do research on it on their own at home.
Yeah, one of the, I think it's interesting in this chapter, Larry says that something like maybe 70 or 80% of the people within 2 hours of viewing homes with us, they're back at their computer online trying to figure out maybe something that, like you said, maybe something that you drove by that they weren't sure of, but that goes back to this. They do not want to miss out on anything. So they want to make sure that wasn't either, why wasn't that on your list? Well, maybe it's $150,000 above their price point or whatever it might be, but at least you'll know it. Good point. Another good reason that
It's also very important with Zillow because most of those properties may not have caught up yet. They may have already been pending for 30 days or so, and they've seen it on Zillow.
Or sold already.
Or sold and closed already. Yeah, it's one of the good reasons that you ought to get familiar with an app that you can use on your phone. I know that HomeSnap is not necessarily available in all of our areas or with all of our MLSs, but if it is available in your area, I would highly encourage you to download that and consider using that one because it does brand things to you and the company as opposed to say Zillow that is going to try to sell off those leads to somebody else right on your listing. So, come up with one of those apps and share it with your clients and or have it available. So if they ask a question, you can hopefully maybe stop and find an answer to that.
But you can also use HomeSnap while you're driving down the street and answer those questions about what about that one. You can just walk in front of it. You can just snap a picture and it'll tell you the condition of it right there.
Good point. That's how it started. I don't particularly use the
Mark, I didn't know
taking
that.
a photo of it, but I just like to find it on the map. Usually you can just punch the map and see it right there. So, all right. So today for our breakout groups, what I want you to do is to practice this funnel process. Now, I know it's maybe not as easy if you're going to share with some people, but you can pretend drawing a funnel and just covering these 3 points. But I just want you to get used to saying those 3 key points again.
So we were talking about how in the market right now, there's another conversation that might need to happen in place of the not pay too much. And that would be, are you willing to pay over value in order to get your dream house or get the house that you want?
Yes, that is a great point, and that may also lead us back to a discussion that I'm going to show a chart that we've covered before, that risk tolerance chart that you may have seen that I've got I think pulled up with us today, and then also I'm interested to see that sheet that Karen has about the multiple offer. But yeah, that is a good point because there's a chance that today they may have to pay more than it's worth if they actually want to win the contract.
That's an important point you guys brought up. I've been in the appraisal industry for about 24 years. And that's one thing that you may have to just talk to your buyer about is that sometimes you have to pay over appraised value to get what you want.
Yep, at least in today's markets. And I was sharing in one of the breakout groups, and this would be good for you to know in your area, how actually tight is your inventory. I know in our area, in that $250,000 to $500,000 price point, we have less than 1 month of inventory on the market. So it's in the 23 or 4 years I've been selling real estate, the inventory is as tight as I've ever seen it. So,
Neil, I know in the book they talk about when you have your rolling top 3 doing a CMA for the client then, again, going back to the theme of not paying too much. Are you still doing that in your business? Are you doing CMAs for buyers like that when they've narrowed it down a lot?
Yeah, I had one that I was working with this weekend that she was actually looking at a condo. And so it was actually the 2 that we looked at were both in the same complex. So I just ran a quick a CMA summary on everything that had been listed in the last 12 months and took it with us. So, that's going to show all the activity in that area, kind of like similar to what I'm thinking you should do for a real estate review. Just a simple overview. Now, if it got to the point where she wanted to make an offer on one of those, then you could drill down a little further. But I think having something similar to that, just showing the activity, again, if you're in a neighborhood, maybe it's within that subdivision. If you're in a more metro area or urban area, maybe you just do a radius search. Or, if you're in a condo development, just those specific condos, or if it's a small condo development, maybe the ones that are right around it. So, but I think you can do something like that, Doug, and I think that's probably fine, but good to know when you're showing them. And
What kind of dialogue are you then having? Like you encountered the one you were describing there where it looked like it was reasonably priced, and you've got multiple offers bidding the price very high over the list price, then over the fair price that the CMA showed you.
It's going to, that's going to get into where I think something like the risk tolerance chart that I shared, and I've got a slide of it coming up and we can talk about it. So we'll talk about some language on that. So I'm going to kind of put that one on hold for now. Next step here, number 6, is kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, where are they in the process? And you might just ask it just like that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, Doug, where are you in the process? And so let's say 1 would be, I'm just starting to think about buying a house now. 10 would be, I need to buy a house by tomorrow. I need to, have it under contract by tomorrow. That would probably be a 10. The next question, and you might ask them this and preface it using the magic wand, or just for fun, Doug, where are you in the process? So you're kind of putting them in that pretend state, so they're not, hopefully they'll share with you the right answer. Now, this next item here, I want you to be cautious as to how you say that. So it doesn't come across as pushy. If I ask Doug, let's say Doug, you're a 6, okay? Doug tells me he's a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale. Doug, what would have to happen for you to be at a 10? And maybe
I'd have to see a home with all the features we want.
Okay, great. Anything else?
At the right price.
Yeah, he wants. Okay, so if price is a critical factor, and again, this is getting back into that discussion we've drifted into a couple times in today's market, it may be an interesting question as to what the right price is. Maybe there's a job situation that they need to get clarification on. Maybe they have, if you're dealing with a first-time buyer, maybe they're going to want to have their, a parent look at it. Maybe they're getting a down payment from their parent. And so there's other things here that hopefully you can pull out and have an answer to that you might not otherwise get. But just don't come across here as too pushy by saying, what do I, or what do you have to do to get them to a 10? Because you're not getting them to a 10. It's what would have to happen for you to move from where they are now to being closer to a 10. All right. This dream home exercise. Has anybody on the call used this where you're basically taking a blank piece of paper or papers if you're dealing with 2 people that are buying a house together, a couple or 2 other people that just might be buying it together, and had them list what was important in their next house? So simple way to do this, take a couple of pieces of paper, give it to your buyer and say, I want you to write down all the things that are important to you in your next house. And then once they've got those written down, I want you to put a star by the top 3 or the 3 must-have features for you. And then if you've got those, once you've got those done, then you're going to kind of work into this next step, which is step 8, and that's the what's and the whys, or the features and benefits. So what is it, what's important and why? So for example, people might want to be on a golf course, not because they play golf, but because they just like the view of a golf course. So is it do they want to live on an actual golf course? Or if they backed up to a green space, that was similar to a golf course, would that be acceptable? Let's look at the next items. Do you absolutely have to have 4 bedrooms, or would 3 bedrooms and an office work for you? You know, is a 3-car garage, does it actually have to have spaces to park 3 cars? Or is it just that maybe they have a bunch of stuff that they store in the garage, where if we had an oversized 2-car garage or a 2-car garage and a nice sized storage building in the back, could that possibly work? You know, I think in today's world with the tight inventories, you have to try to be a little bit more flexible here. And I think you might tell people that when you set them up on searches. You might say, I don't want to limit us too much, so they'll have some more selection to see. Just keep in mind that unless some of these are a hard stop for you, I may include some other ones, and we'll see if it'll work for your situation, instead of, you know, having them where you're doing a search for them and you come up with 2 possibilities or 1 possibility. How else are y'all using some of the language on this as you're asking people? Anybody? All right, we'll move on. So next step, number 9, cash or loan. So I believe it's a compliment if you ask somebody if they're going to pay cash. Don't necessarily assume that they're getting a loan. So it might sound something like this. Mark, are you going to be paying cash for the home, or are you going to choose to get a loan?
Don't have that much cash, so I guess it's going to be a loan.
Okay, perfect. So, you know, it's you're giving them a little bit of a compliment there by assuming or asking if they're going to pay cash, versus that realtor who answers the phone and about the second or third thing out of their mouth is, are you pre-qualified? And just talking about financing in general can be a more complicated subject. So that's why Larry is suggesting that you don't necessarily make it the first thing out of your mouth that you're going to say. Anybody have a different way that they position this with buyers? So assume cash, then, you know, ask if they're going to choose to get a loan. So
I have a question.
yeah, maybe what she was going to ask is, if they say they have cash, then what's the next step? So I'm gonna just pretend that that's what you asked me. I would say that if they tell you they're going to pay cash, then you would just say, you know, in today's competitive marketplace, whether you're getting a loan or whether you're paying cash, we need to submit something on the front end when we make an offer that has that proof of funds. That's what we call it. And so as we get started, then you're going to need to provide me with that proof of funds. So again, you can say this in kind of a nicer way, or you can say it in an extraordinarily demanding way. But I think, you know, a logical question might be, if they tell you you're going to pay cash, great, Mary, where is that cash coming from? Is it coming from an investment account, a 401k, a savings account, or something else maybe that's not as liquid? You know, I think if they ever say it's coming from a settlement, then that is a pretty big red flag for me. But as you're speaking with people about a loan, these are other things that I think are important to bring up here. The record low rates, the 1%, 10% rule of thumb. By the way, as a little quiz, who can describe the 1%, 10% rule of thumb as it relates to interest rates?
For every 1%, your interest rate goes up, your buying power goes down. As
goes down 10%. You got it.
10%, right.
Perfect. Awesome. And then, you know, the other thing is they may not, and this is probably going to work in a lot of markets, that if they want to get exactly they have certain things that are on that must-have list. They may have to drive a little further to get what they want, from the metro area. But your goal here is to try to get them clarity and not get them bogged down in that financing piece. All right. Any other language that anybody uses for the cash or loan, or maybe some question that Mary had, like if they tell you they're going to pay cash, a different way that you ask for proof of funds that works for you?
Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Pat, and then we'll get whoever's next.
I just tell them that when they make the offer, that I'm going to have either a pre-approval letter from a lender or proof of funds if they're paying cash, which is a bank statement or an investment account or one of multitudes of things that show they have the cash available. And if they say, well, I'm good for it, some people get really angry at the thought that you might not believe them. And I just tell them that of course I believe them, but to the seller, they don't know them. They're just a name on a piece of paper, and they don't know one way or the other whether or not they have the cash available or qualify for a loan. And that kind of will calm them down. They understand it.
Yeah, I know we have seen in many of our markets, some people try to put down cash on an offer, and then 2 days later, after they've got the contract worked out, they're trying to flip it into a loan. And so you could even use something like that, in our competitive marketplace, we've had some people that say they're going to pay cash, but they actually have to get a loan. So if you're going to say cash, let's show them the proof that you got cash, because we want to make it as strong as possible when we present this offer. All right, somebody else had something they were going to chime in here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the questions that I ask them in the interview process I have with them is if there's any other purchaser or co-borrower or any people that would need to see the home before they made a decision to make the purchase, like parents or whatever. Sometimes they get involved at the last minute and you don't even know about it.
Yeah, their down payment could be coming from the parents or some other family member. It's good to know those things on the front end, because sometimes, I don't know if, I'm sure many of you on the call have had this happen, that the old parents looking at it can sometimes be the kiss of death, because this is the one time, and I tend to tell people, the buyers, this is the one time that mom or dad or Aunt Susie or whoever can say something negative about this house, because once you buy it, they're probably not going to. So, keep that in mind. All right. The next step 10 is kind of what happens next. And there's a couple of things here. Is there anything we missed? Which this is a good place, Mark, that you might want to bring in that about having somebody else look at it or somebody else providing a down payment. Reviewing the market. We're going to talk about that with our chart here in just a second. Again, we want to review that market before we get ready to write an offer. What are our expectations, and then preparing for negotiations. Now, on the preparing for negotiations, when you talk about making an offer and giving somebody a draft purchase and sale agreement that is probably, I don't know, it's going to vary based on the state, but anywhere from 8 to 10 or 12 pages just on the purchase and sale agreement, I think it's helpful to kind of chunk it down, like he talks about in the book, about, when we go to make an offer, there's really only 5 or 6 things that we need to discuss. So you're making it an easier decision as opposed to something very complex. Okay, here's that risk tolerance chart that we have shared earlier. And I will, whoops, sorry about that. Back up here. This is the one, and I'll be happy to put this in the chat box here in a minute and we can talk about it. But this is something that is right out of Ninja Selling. All I did to it was change a little bit of the language on a few of these that more relates to our areas and how we say things. But you can see over here, we're talking about a price. You know, are they going to be willing to go above list price or not? What are they doing on financing? Are they paying cash, or do they, on the other end of the spectrum, are they going to have a loan that requires down payment assistance? Because, you know, if you are evaluating multiple offers, obviously cash offers tend to be the strongest. What is it you're going to do about inspections? Is it something like waive all inspections, which I don't necessarily recommend, or maybe they're going to be something a little bit less than that? Again, we've got appraisals, timing, and closing costs. So I'm curious I know a lot of people are having these discussions. This is a good place. What are you saying about, you don't have to cover all of these, but what are you saying about one in particular of these different areas that's been effective for you? Somebody? Anybody? Who's talking about some of these areas?
Well, I got a question about one of the areas.
Sure.
The waive appraisal. Must appraise above list, must appraise at list and at sales. I thought that it must appraise at what it sells for.
Yeah, so if it appraises, let's just do simple math here, okay? So let's say it's $100,000 sales price. If it appraises for 95, then I've got to, as a buyer, bring $5,000 additional down payment to the closing table to get it to work. Now, sometimes people will do that, but if you've got these houses that are going way over appraisal, keep in mind this is a tricky situation in that that example I gave you earlier of a house selling for $50,000 over. If it doesn't appraise, do they have $50,000 laying around that they can bring to this transaction to make it work? Because I have seen, you know, I think about the most I've seen a house not appraised and the people still go ahead and buy it was about a little less than $40,000. But if those people had just waived the appraisal, you know, they're going to have to come out of pocket with that much more money.
Appraised at 500, they paid 550 for it. So that means they had to bring 50 grand cash to the table.
On top of whatever they were putting in as a down payment and their closing cost. So it can be a big number. That's why when you talk about you know, whether they're going to waive an appraisal, that is a heavy conversation. They need to understand the implications of what they're saying there.
But because they bought it at that price doesn't, I mean, just when they bought it at that price, that means it's worth that price, right? In their eyes, but doesn't make the value of the other houses more valuable because they paid $550 for it.
Well, it does have it can potentially make the other houses in the neighborhood worth more if it closes, but you know, you just got to have a situation where there's not a long line of people that have an extra $50,000 cash to put into a house. Now, if your people are paying cash and they got plenty of cash, then it shouldn't be a problem. But just know that that can be a big one because a lot of your average buyer doesn't have an extra $30,000, $50,000 to put into a home on 30 days notice.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, and I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, if you were with us, but Matt Morgan out in our Collierville office in the Memphis region, he took this idea and took it a step further. He took some of these charts, printed them out and laminated them, and then uses a dry erase marker talking with clients about, you know, what their specifically what their risk tolerance level is on these different areas based on that house. Because if it's a house that they absolutely love, they may be willing to go a little bit higher on the risk tolerance in some of these areas than it's on a house that just is, okay. Maybe it just barely meets their criteria. All right. Anybody else thoughts on how you're saying this with your buyer clients? I know we're pushing our time frame, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. By the way, if you didn't get this specific one, if you'll just drop me something in chat or email, I'll email you a PDF of it. Lastly here, these are some things that some of these we covered last week, but these are just things that you may want to think about. You may want to have a cream puff house story or a 85%. We covered last week that 85% perfect house. So basically you're kind of giving them permission to buy it if it's not 100% everything they want, but maybe it's some easy things they can do to the house that'll get it there. Anybody else used that language like a cream puff house as to what that's going to be like? All right, the way I say it might be something along the lines of, there's certain houses that I call a cream puff. What's a cream puff house? It's a house that is in superb condition, that's priced right, that's photographed well, staged well. It just shows great. Those cream puff houses in our market don't last, usually don't even last a day. And sometimes if we don't go see it that day that it comes on the market, we may not even get to see it. And in some cases, it's not even by the end of the day. It's like literally within hours, it can be under contract. That lost house, again, not that you're really wanting to scare people here, but it's just if they find something that they really like, it might be a question like, are you okay if this house happens to sell today? Or is that going to be okay with you? And then lastly, that story about giving them permission to buy, the story in the book talks about a guy that talks about, he gives them like an odds of finding what they want. And he basically lets them know that in his case, 60% of his buyers find something the first time out. So he's basically kind of giving them permission to go ahead and buy without feeling like that they've looked at every possible house that might work for them.
Hey, Neil.
Yes.
Instead of cream puff, if some people do not like cream puffs, you want to find out what they really like. What is their end all?
Who doesn't like cream puffs?
If they like cheesecake, whatever it is, I bring up Willy Wonka Golden Ticket. Everybody knows Willy Wonka Golden Ticket. And if they don't, then the Jerry Maguire, show me the money house, whatever you want to bring up that excites them is a good idea. And then the 85% thing, at first when that was brought up, I didn't like it. I thought I want my people to always be like 100%, And so last night I actually showed some homes and I brought up 85%. And I brought it up that like studies have shown that if you guys are, around that 85% on a house, that might be our house. Because they were both saying, the husband and wife, well, that's an 8, that's a 9. I said, sounds to me like 85% between the two of you. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, yeah. It was really kind of fun to bring that up because I used to think, who wants 85%? It's kind of like, we're so trained in life. Everything needs to be 100% or 110. And guess what? It's not in real life. So, and I just, as far as giving permission to buy, I'll say to them, if you go home tonight, would you be sad if this house sold, or would you be like, next one, I'm fine?
It's a good way to put it. I like that.
If you were worried or sad, or concern that this home could sell, then we need to really think about it and talk now.
Yeah, that's
Sorry, I just had
especially,
to
no,
throw
no,
that
no,
all in.
that's good. It's especially important in our market that we're dealing with, pretty much across our whole footprint. In certain price points, things are selling incredibly fast. And it's probably good that you say those things. And, you could preface it by saying, see, Lauren, this is not meant in a way to put any pressure on you, but I'm just letting you know things are selling very fast. And if you have one of those, quick CMAs of the neighborhood, and you can see where, these houses have sold 0 days on the market, 1 day on the market, 2 days on the market, hopefully then that'll sink in. And sometimes people, they may have to lose a house or two to get the message here.
Neil, I've used one that I've heard, I can't even remember who I got this from, but the expression, if you have to sleep on it, somebody else is going to be sleeping in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And depending on how you say that, it can come across as okay, or it can come across as a little schlick.
Well, you have to tailor it to the people.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is when we were talking earlier about a little flow chart, this is one that was on the Crye-Leike site. It's actually on the blog is where I got this one. So if that one kind of does it for you, then know that that's available over there. You can use something like that just to kind of give them the way that the closing process will flow. And I know we're a few minutes over, so I'm going to wrap up. And next week, we're going to cover the seller process. So that's on pages 266 to 292. I appreciate you joining us today. If you have any specific questions and want to hang around for a minute, I'm happy to hang around and answer some questions.